What if a single weapon could shatter the certainties of every world leader and every freezing household watching the news? Imagine a world where endless diplomatic talks, late-night summits, and careful statements about global order are suddenly irrelevant. Russia has just unveiled the Burevestnik, a nuclear-powered cruise missile able to fly for months, dodge radar, and strike anywhere on Earth with almost no warning. This is not just another military upgrade. It is a disruption so profound that the familiar rules of politics and security collapse overnight. In London, panic jolts through both government and media. The usual British calm, measured responses, and understated press releases gives way to open alarm. Suddenly, even the most composed officials see their playbook upended. For the West, and especially the United Kingdom, the Burevestnik is more than a missile. It is a phantom with a warhead, able to change direction mid-flight, nearly undetectable, and unconstrained by fuel limits. The old balance of power, based on predictability and treaties, evaporates in an instant. The consequences ripple far beyond military planning. When one technological leap can bypass every defense and rewrite every negotiation, the entire continent feels the shock. From cabinet offices to kitchen tables, everyone's sense of safety and daily routine is thrown into question. Ignore the pace of technological change, and you risk missing the early warnings, the very signals that could jeopardize your stability, threaten your security, and upend your life in ways you never imagined. So how did a single missile test in Russia trigger chaos in London and force every European capital to rethink the meaning of safety? Let us trace the shockwaves as they surge from panic in Westminster to rapid, desperate policy shifts across Europe. The Burevestnik's reveal did not just alter military equations. It forced leaders to admit that their old defenses no longer mattered. What happened next would test the resolve of governments and the nerves of ordinary citizens alike. How can a single missile send the world's most unflappable governments into panic? Picture a weapon that does not just bend the rules of war, but tears up the very manual nation's trust for survival. This is Burevestnik, a name that means stormbringer in Russian, and it is no ordinary missile. Burevestnik is powered by a nuclear engine. Unlike conventional weapons that run out of fuel in mere hours, it can remain airborne for months on end. This gives it the power to choose unpredictable paths, circling the globe, slipping past every radar and missile shield. It is nearly invisible, and its ability to change direction mid-flight makes it a ghost, one armed with a nuclear payload. When Russia announced a successful test of Burevestnik, Europe shuddered. In Britain, a country famous for its composure, the reaction bordered on hysteria. News headlines blared warnings. The Telegraph urged emergency nuclear cooperation with Germany, an alliance that would have been unthinkable just weeks before. For the British, who typically respond to crises with calm statements and hot tea, this was open panic. Why such alarm? Because Burevestnik threatens to make old nuclear deterrence almost meaningless. The old game was chess, matching submarines for submarines, missiles for missiles, each side aware of the other's limits. Now the chessboard has a new piece that ignores every rule. The knight leaps wherever it pleases, the bishop teleports, and the game has no end. This weapon makes every defense plan feel as outdated as a medieval wall against a modern cruise missile. Across the Atlantic, the United States projected calm, at least outwardly. President Trump's bravado took center stage. We have subs off their coast. We do not need to fly 8,000 miles. It sounded bold, but behind the scenes, American officials were deeply concerned. As Trump joked for the cameras, military advisors and intelligence experts quietly scrambled to assess the new threat. Ignoring technological leaps like Burevestnik is more than foolish. It is dangerous for everyone. When a single missile can evade all known defenses, the balance of power shifts overnight. Most people think military innovation is a distant issue, but these changes shape daily life. Whether your city becomes a target, whether your country is forced to spend billions on new arms, whether your economy is shaken by uncertainty. The true shock is not just in the headlines. It is in how nations must now recalculate their futures, and what that means for every ordinary person, trapped between a fading world order and a new, unpredictable reality. But what exactly makes Burevestnik so revolutionary and so terrifying? To understand, we need to look inside the missile itself, at the science and secrets driving this new era. Burevestnik is a technical marvel, a feat that was once thought impossible. Its nuclear propulsion system is a direct descendant of Cold War dreams, like Project Pluto, the American attempt in the 1950s to build a nuclear-powered ramjet missile. Project Pluto was abandoned in part because the environmental and safety risks were too high. The prospect of a missile spewing radioactive exhaust across continents was simply too much even for the era's most hawkish minds. But Russia now claims to have solved these technical hurdles, creating a missile that can fly for months without emitting a detectable trail. This breakthrough did not occur in a vacuum. For years, military planners around the world have worried about the limitations of existing missile defense systems. Take, for example, the American ground-based mid-course defense, a system designed to intercept incoming missiles during their flight. These systems rely on predicting missile trajectories and acting within minutes. Burevestnik's unpredictable path and near-infinite endurance make such interception almost impossible. Imagine trying to catch a ghost that can fly around the world, change its route at will, and vanish from radar screens for days at a time. The implications are enormous. In the past, treaties like the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, START, imposed limits and transparency, making arms races manageable. But a weapon like Burevestnik undermines the very logic of these agreements. It is a loophole that cannot be closed by negotiation alone. When old alliances fray, who will rise to meet the storm? And at what price? That question echoes across Europe as Russia's Burevestnik missile casts a long, radioactive shadow. For decades, Germany clung to pacifism, environmental ideals, and an uneasy distance from force. Overnight, that chapter closes. Berlin pivots, almost shocked by its own momentum. Pacifism is swept aside in favor of the largest military expansion since the Cold War. The government reinstates conscription, swelling the Bundeswehr's ranks. Budgets that once funded solar farms and railways now pour into tanks, missiles, and cyber arsenals. Sums once unimaginable for arms are moved without hesitation. But money is only the surface. Beneath it, Germany's national character shifts. Political voices grow sharper, dropping old apologies. For the first time in generations, German leaders stop tiptoeing around their own strength. They use it, boldly, unapologetically, redrawing Europe's security landscape. In Berlin's ministries, a new mantra spreads: excel, not excuses. The transformation is striking. Imagine a Germany that, only a few years ago, hesitated to send even non-lethal aid to conflict zones. Now, overnight, it approves military spending packages measured in tens of billions of euros, equivalent to the entire defense budget of some major European countries. Debates that once took months are resolved in days. The German parliament, the Bundestag, passes emergency powers to accelerate arms procurement, echoing the mobilization seen during the Second World War. No longer waiting for European unity, Berlin acts alone when needed. Treaties are signed, troops are deployed, timelines are enforced, leaving Brussels scrambling. Elsewhere, Europe hesitates. Paris clings to the illusion of nuclear deterrence, but ducks hard questions about readiness. Warsaw eyes Berlin's rise with deep suspicion, haunted by memories. Brussels, mired in bureaucracy, cannot keep up. A deeper tremor shakes the continent. The weight of history, once a brake on German ambition, becomes fuel for a new mission. Germany steps into the role of power, not just in wealth, but in will and force. Yet every new era exacts a toll. Europeans face a harsher reality: rising militarization, swollen defense budgets, and shrinking control over their own fate. The rules are rewritten. Retreat is impossible. This is no longer a distant debate. It is immediate and personal, reaching into the daily lives of millions. Consider the impact at the local level. In cities like Hamburg and Munich, Residents see new military recruitment offices opening, and job fairs now include booths for defense contractors. University engineering programs shift their focus from green technology to advanced weapons research. High school students debate military service as a real career path for the first time in decades. The social contract changes, and the sense of national purpose tilts from prosperity to security. But how much can a society transform before something breaks? The answer may hinge on choices made in the heat of crisis. What happens when politics leaves your city in the cold and dark? For the people of Kyiv, this is not just a theoretical question. It is a fast-approaching threat. With winter closing in, officials warn that entire districts may face freezing nights, unreliable power, and no safety net. The old trust that authorities would keep the heat and lights on has vanished. In this stark new reality, ordinary Ukrainians scramble to protect their families. They pay inflated prices for scarce generators, hoard firewood, and build makeshift stoves just to ward off the chill. Some, desperate and defeated, abandon their homes and flee the city, leaving behind apartments that may soon be impossible to inhabit. The familiar rhythm of Kyiv, the soft hum of heaters, the golden glow of street lamps, could disappear without warning. As citizens fight to survive, the government offers only hopeful speeches and hollow slogans. Lawmakers remain cloistered in their well-heated offices, insulated from the biting cold that seeps through every unheated home. Their reassurances sound empty to families wrapped in layers, huddled together as the silence deepens and the power grids stutter. The gulf between political promises and daily reality has never yawned wider. Leaders boast of resilience and victory, but the people feel only isolation and dread. Every time officials claim strength, the sense of betrayal grows, while children shiver in darkened rooms. Meanwhile, across Europe, headlines trumpet military buildups and the latest arms race. But these grand pronouncements do not thaw frozen pipes or fill empty fuel tanks. No amount of expensive weaponry can replace the basic comforts now at risk. As the world obsesses over advanced missiles and shifting borders, it is the ordinary citizen who pays the price, in lost warmth, lost hours, and sometimes lost dignity. Look at the practical steps people are taking in response. Neighborhood groups organize to share resources, pooling money for communal generators, and arranging shifts to watch over vulnerable neighbors. In rural areas, farmers revert to techniques their grandparents used, insulating homes with straw and building wood stoves from scavenged bricks. Social media explodes with guides on emergency heating, water purification, and food storage. Information once reserved for survivalists now circulates among teachers, doctors, and parents. Ignore these human costs, and the danger goes far beyond mere inconvenience. For millions, survival and dignity are now truly at stake. The fight is no longer just for national pride, but for heat, light, and the right to a normal life. But how did it come to this? To understand the roots of this crisis, we need to look beyond the city's borders, toward the new weapons and strategies reshaping Europe's entire security landscape. Are you prepared for a world where safety demands hard decisions, not courteous agreements? The old routines, summits, declarations, and green manifestos are being swept aside by a colder urgency. Nations are turning to mobilization, military calculus, and the raw rules of survival. The era of predictable diplomacy is crumbling, replaced by a fast-moving contest as new weapons and fresh doctrines redraw the map of power almost overnight. National resilience is no longer just a slogan. It has become the spine of a country's ability to endure sudden shocks, war, cyber attacks, ruptured supply lines, and abrupt crises. The survival of entire states now depends on how swiftly they adapt and how deeply their social fabric holds. History is blunt. Those caught unprepared always bear the worst scars. History offers many parallels. During the oil crisis of the 1970s, Western nations scrambled to adapt to a sudden loss of energy security. Long lines formed at gas stations, and governments instituted rationing for the first time since the Second World War. Neighborhoods organized carpooling and emergency heating centers. In Finland, civil defense training became mandatory, with citizens learning basic survival skills in case of war or disaster. These hard lessons echo today, reminding us that resilience is built before the shock, not after. But this is not a call for governments alone. Ordinary citizens must rise to the moment because every neighborhood, workplace, and family stands on the front lines. That means organizing with your community, not waiting for distant leaders to produce a rescue plan. Learn your local risks, build new bonds, share knowledge, and demand true accountability. Never let promises from above be your only shield. Practical steps matter. Start by mapping your local vulnerabilities. Is your area dependent on a single power plant or a fragile supply chain for food and medicine? Form small groups to check on the elderly and disabled during emergencies. Stock basic supplies, water, canned goods, batteries, not as an act of panic, but of prudence. Attend local council meetings and ask pointed questions about emergency preparedness. The more engaged you become, the less likely you are to be blindsided by the next crisis. Global power struggles are no longer far-off stories. When a single missile shifts the balance in Berlin or Kiev, consequences can ripple into your life through higher prices, shortages, policy shocks, or sudden limits on movement. Vigilance is your earliest defense. The faster you notice these global shocks, the more room you have to act. Above all, do not count on old institutions to protect you simply because they have before. The world's rules are changing at breakneck speed, and volatility has become the norm. If you settle for comfort, trusting that someone else has a plan, you risk being caught out the next time the ground shifts, whether it shakes your finances, your freedom, or your very sense of safety. What happens when the next technological leap lands in the wrong hands, or is misunderstood by those who hold the power? The true test is coming, and no one is immune. Consider the lessons from history's great technological leaps. When the atomic bomb was first tested in 1945, it was not just a weapon. It was a paradigm shift that left the old military doctrines in ashes. The world scrambled to adapt. NATO was formed. Civil defense drills became a fixture in schools, and nuclear shelters were dug in cities across Europe and America. Yet, for all the preparation, many nations were caught flat-footed by the speed of change. The arrival of Burevestnik echoes that moment. Its appearance forces us to question every comfortable assumption. Will alliances hold when faced with a threat no shield can stop? Can societies make hard sacrifices for security without losing the freedoms that define them? These are not academic questions. They are the urgent dilemmas of our time. How are you preparing for the new landscape of power? This is not a distant problem. Change is already on your doorstep. The rules you counted on are gone, and if you trust in yesterday's systems to protect you, you are already behind. The Burevestnik missile is more than Russia's flex. It is a warning shot. One dramatic breakthrough can overturn decades of security habits, upend diplomacy, and shred the assumptions that shape your daily life. When weapons escape predictability, so do the dangers that ripple outward. Governments are scrambling. Emergency summits, secretive deals, desperate attempts to catch up. But if the old playbook is useless, then every nation and every citizen is exposed. You may not sit at the table where deals are struck, but you will feel the shockwaves in your budget, your sense of safety, and the hours spent navigating new risks. Fail to adapt, and you surrender control over your security and your future. The consequences are real. Higher taxes to bankroll new defenses, lost freedoms traded for thin promises of protection, your country's reputation battered as leaders fumble for answers. This is not just about governments. The private sector, your job, your digital identity, even the news you trust, none are immune to the turbulence of this arms race. Most people do not see how fast the ground is shifting. Today, Europe debates energy. Tomorrow, it revives military alliances thought buried with the Cold War. What felt like peace yesterday can vanish overnight, replaced by a frantic chase for new technologies and uncertain deterrence. The world you thought you knew may already be history. So ask yourself, Are you fighting yesterday's shadows, or preparing for what power politics really means now? Waiting for crisis to force your hand is the most dangerous gamble of all. You still have a choice. Watch history sweep past, or shape how you and your community respond. Start by questioning your own assumptions. Then, demand your leaders do the same, before the next leap in military technology leaves you further behind. Remember, no single government or citizen can control the tide of technological change alone. But together, through vigilance, preparation, and honest debate, we can shape our response, secure our communities, and keep the next Stormbringer from dictating our fate.